The boy who was afraid of the dark. The darkness was all around. It took away the light. It pierced those sensations we dread, leading us to close our eyes in fear. It had a way to cause our pulse rate to rise, and this led to those undulating thoughts. Back and forth they would seem to go, and with it the sense of comfort. It left us uneasy. I couldn't describe those thoughts, for ugly thoughts rarely need to be expressed fully, but embraced through our reactions to them, to be sufficient in our task of reducing their influence they have, in whatever way they can corrupt us from living our lives. Tom was facing the dark, his eyes fixed on the dark. He was repulsed by the dark, but he somehow peeped into the dark. Was it a hope to find someone to break this curse he bore? Tom thought there was behind the dark, or even in front of the dark, some lurking monster. Tom toyed with the idea of someone coming out of darkness to take his fears away. But like when you drop an object, perhaps in a careless way, it is lost from your grasp. The image of his rescuer dropped from his conscience, and he realised what would now happen. The return to the peering, unseen eyes that saw him hide away. It was simply no good. There was the in-between. Then morning. His mother Sylvia was in the kitchen after one such night as just described, working hard to ensure the family sat down to some food before they all left for school. Tom was an only child at the point of relating this story. Tom had overheard the commotion between his mum and dad. Playful at times, defiant in others, Tom liked the idea of a younger brother or sister. But then, like his mum and dad, when some specific detail about this new brother or sister was discussed, he too could go, "Yuck, no way I want a little brother." Or, "What will happen to me?" You might know the type of trouble Tom was going through yourself. So Tom had his breakfast, kissed his mum with a big hug, and smiled before he said goodbye for school. Sylvia stood by the front door as Tom disappeared from walking at a brisk pace. He soon caught up with his class friends and began to walk at a snail's pace, but without the slime, though he did pick his nose on the odd occasion. When Tom and the others arrived at their school, the playground was busy with activity, exchanging stories of the night before. There was certainly giggling to be overheard. There was also arguments between close friends. A group of girls were seen in the middle of hopscotch. Tom looked. He didn't care for it. Only girls play hopscotch, he would say to himself, and then changed direction and wandered into the school building to find out if his name was on the list for the role in the school play. In order to observe the board, he had to pass a section of the internal entrance. There was a problem though. The lights were not fitted. There was no glass to bring in extra light, so those doubts began to intrude on his thinking. He stopped and surveyed the area. It made him feel at ease and reminded him, tucked up in bed, staring into the room's darkness. Tom thought to himself and stubbornly tapped the wall with his foot. He looked around, but the outer door had now closed, yet the voices were still to be heard. Cheerful noises, voices that carried laughter in his direction. Tom frowned. He began to return to the door he came through and return to the playground in the safety of the daylight. He decided to wait for the bell. On that occasion, he didn't care he was defeated. But there were days when he disliked how he let the darkness win. He imagined the creatures within the darkness to be laughing. But Tom strangely believed at the same time they would be defeated. To hold on to it was important to him, especially if he had a little brother or sister. What would he do then? The bell rang out as it always did. The teacher's already waiting. The kids ran across the playground, while others behind, as if they were with their parents shopping. And by that I do not mean the interested child that picks out what catches them, but the bored, experienced kid that resents having to go through the aisles to pick out food. Tom smiled. That badly lit passage began to appear as if there was no hurdle to be crossed. The other children next to him had somehow weakened the crippling effect. He looked around and silently rejoiced, not wishing to bring it to the others' attention. He saw what they could do. There will no doubt always be bullies in some shape and form. He left the thought and glanced by something that had been of special importance to him. He stopped. Those boys and girls that were behind him began to be annoyed. I shan't bore you with those words. He didn't care for it either. He began to walk to a large board fixed to the wall. It was alive with colours, shapes, pins, pens on a string, hanging loose. Most things you would find on a school board about the activities going on in that school. Tom began scanning to pick up a trace of what he was keen to learn, and that was, had he landed the character he wanted to play, or had he been given a less favourable creation? His anticipation grew. He could feel his excitement growing. Please, please, he continued to say to himself. To anyone looking on, there was a sudden silence. There were no children present in the corridor now. Tom didn't mind, or had he not noticed? He took his finger and rather ran it along a single sheet of white paper on the board. At the moment, he didn't care who else was in. He wanted to know if he had been successful. 3 little letters. This is all he hoped for. The finger went down the list of names. Was it in alphabetical order? Character order? Who cares, he thought. If I see my name, I'm in. No other Tom to worry about either. His eyes recognised the letter T. Too long for Tom. Then he had Thomas. Wait, is Tom short for Thomas? He hadn't expected this, and he began to be a little anxious. Then he read his last name, Jenkins. Thomas Jenkins. His mind recollected all those faces at the sign-up day. He didn't look so favourably on him. He moved his finger still further, hoping his name would be there. And then he saw his name, Tom Slate. What was his role? There was a question mark. What did it mean? Was it he was questionable, or the part he played? He had to find out. He went over it again. He couldn't decide. So he planned to ask the teacher in charge, first opportunity he had. His thoughts reminded him where he was. School corridor. But what for? He glanced at his watch. He ran to the third door of the left and entered without knocking. The whole classroom of familiar faces looked over to where he was standing. Tom began to walk hurriedly to his seat when the teacher spoke his name, then some words he failed to comprehend, but felt almost certain it was to do with his being late. How late was he? A mere 7 minutes? Surely it wasn't that long. But then he was the centre of attention. Tom managed to explain the reason, but he was assured that he was answered with someone showing an angry tone. Tom felt awkward. Did he have to argue with his teacher or just agree with whatever he said to be able to sit back down? He didn't have to wait long to find out how much trouble he was in. So after the teacher asked Tom to sit down, he was given a sheet of paper. 3, in fact. On the first, a sentence written in red ink. Do not be late for class in a way that would not benefit you. And he noticed 300X written in the corner within a circle. The teacher added, this comes as a warning to you, Tom. You can either sit in your lunch break writing out this punishment exercise, or you can complete it at home. However, you must still get your parent to sign it. Tom looked down again at the sheet and understood. Tom was blessed that he understood certain situations. In other kids, the situation could be so much different. Nothing exciting came in the next hour, nor even the following hour. He did give up his lunchtime to complete the exercise. His hand felt cramped. He needed to flex his fingers because they seized up after the repetitive nature of the exercise. He was impressed with the way he kept the words neat, never straying from the size of the letters he used. He didn't even think about the teacher negatively. He simply did it. After the final alarm of the school went off, he changed from his normal routine and found his way back through the traffic, causing others to say briefly, out the way, or, Tom, where are you going? He wasn't able to reply. To most, given the frenzy of excitement to the children heading home for the day. Tom found out the good news he was relying on. Tom was chosen. He could now relax and put it to one side. He would relish the part he was given. He would devote all his time to it. The late autumn winds interfered in the restless state of hair on the way home. He was wrapped up, but not his hair. He had forgotten about his hat since the night before with the strange episode in the dark. As he remembered more, he began to raise those feelings he had so desperately kept to himself. When he walked in the door, his face red from battling the competitive high winds, his mum greeted him with some pancakes and chocolate. There was always room for this, he thought. Yet he felt a slight guilt of having to ruin the moment with the exercise that requires a parental signature. He looked out. It was darker now than when he walked in. He felt relieved he was inside. The warmth of to have felt so comfortable. The warmth of a house felt so comfortable. The night silently drew in. The curtains were now drawn, the darkness unable to be observed. Tom began to play some games in his room. There were many outbursts of joy or frustration heard, emanating from Tom. His mother called out, "Time for bed, Tom." He wrestled with the idea and began the routine that accompanies the out-of-place request. Tom is of the group that believes boys should stay up all night. There is no tiredness, just laziness to rebel against the onslaught of tiredness. A bit like the so-called pangs of hunger. If someone prevented themselves not to eat, they would stop being hungry. So Tom was curious to know if sleep was like that. Sylvia wasn't too keen. She had a chuckle, though, with the idea that her son Tom had. Sylvia decided to wait a while to tell Tom about his new baby sister. The mother in her knows best.